Hi everyone, it's 1 o'clock, so I'd like to officially welcome you all to the third part of our three-part Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario webinar series. My name is Emma Fursten Kaufman. I'm a knowledge broker on the Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario provincial team. We're really glad to have you all here today. I think we have a really exciting panel. Before we begin, just some quick housekeeping. I want to let you all know that your audio will be broadcast through your computer speakers, but you do have an option to listen by the phone if that becomes an issue. All participants will be muted today, so you can use our chat pod to ask any questions or to make any comments to the speakers, and you can access the chat pod either on the right side of your screen or by that little blue bubble you should see at the bottom center of your screen. The webinar today will be recorded and we'll be posting it on youthhubs.ca. We'll also be emailing the recording to all participants today. And to let you all know, you do have the ability to control how you view the webinar today. At the top right side of your screen, there's a little control panel that lets you control how you view it today. We will be reserving all questions for the panelists till our Q&A section at the end. And then finally, I just want to let you know that we will have an evaluation survey pop up at the end of the webinar. We'd love it if you could provide us with some feedback. That helps us know how we're doing and how we can improve our webinars in the future. So we'd really appreciate that. And with that, I would love to introduce you to Dr. Joanna Henderson, who is the Executive Director of Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario.
Thank you very much. Annie, hello, bonjour, everyone. I use she, her, they pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario, which I want to tell you a little bit about. But before I say that, I just want to acknowledge that I am very fortunate to personally live on the lands of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. For Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario, I want to let you know of our commitment to reconciliation and to honoring the land through programs and places that reflect and respect its heritage. We will embrace the healing traditions of the ancestors and weave them into our practices. We are committed to creating new relationships and partnerships with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in Ontario and everywhere. Miigwech. Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario is an initiative that's intended to improve access to young people across the province to services that are purposely designed to meet their needs. It's been co-created with young people as well as family members and service providers, as well as being influenced by the best available evidence. It's a platform where young people can walk in and access service, access interventions, and access a whole wide range of services, really trying to think of young people in the holistic view of their lives, not just health or mental health or substance use or employment or education, but in fact, think of young people in their holistic being. We have 10 sites across the province. And also want to acknowledge that there are a number of other sites across the province who aren't officially part of the Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario initiative, but have for a long time and continue to make really important contributions to this integrated model of services for youth. And of course, our services are for 12 to 25-year-olds. I'm really delighted to be able to introduce our speakers today. We have a great lineup, and I appreciate each one of you taking the time to share your experiences with us. Christopher Bork uses he, they pronouns. Christopher is the coordinator of the Transitional Age Youth Program at Loft Community Services in Toronto. Loft has been involved with 3 of our hubs that are in the Toronto area. Christopher will be moderating our panel today. Our panelists include Anmal Sampson, who uses she, her pronouns. Anmal has been a peer support worker at Stella's Place for over a year now. Anmal engages participants at Stella's Place through various drop-in and registered programming like Stella's Studio, an art-based group, and individual peer support sessions. Anmal believes in meeting people where they're at and viewing everyone with positive regard and gentleness, and carries this in both her work and her personal life. And just a shout out to Stella's Place. Stella's Place would be a great example of an integrated youth services that isn't formally part of Youth Wellness Hubs Ontario, but with whom we have a close relationship. Our next panelist is Brintha Maharan. She uses she, her pronouns. Brintha works as a peer support worker at Loft Community Services. She is an advocate for social justice and has been working with Loft's Transitional Age Youth Program for 3 years. She continues to provide services through one-on-one counseling support and facilitates groups such as DBT and peer support groups. In addition to working at Loft, she continues her advocacy work in the South Asian community and works towards educating folks on the importance of mental wellness and healing through trauma. Our final panelist is Sarah Traore, who uses she, her pronouns. She is a mental health peer support worker at CAMH's Slate Center for Early Intervention. Sarah's lived experience has shaped her life's work. She has made it her life's mission to be of service and lend support to the most vulnerable by being a nurturing source of help, an empowering ally, an inspiring example of recovery, and a fierce agent for social justice and social change. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am really looking forward to hearing from our panel. Turning it over to you, Christopher.
Thanks, Joanna. Hello, everyone. Again, yes, it's Christopher, and I will be moderating the discussion and just guiding us along, but leaving it to our fantastic panelists to share. And these are the topics we will be covering today, and we will spend time on each question. And just for the sake of the moderation, maybe we'll just start with one panelist starting. We can go alphabetical, so maybe Anmal, Brintha, and Sarah, each of you can start on each question, and then we'll open it up to that free discussion. So one person starts, and then we can just open it up to have a discussion on that question. So let's move on to our first question. So now we are in this totally new context, and the way the work looks now. And so, what does peer work look like now in this virtual context, in this context where we have physical distancing? What's different and what's new, interesting since the pandemic started? What new tools have you developed? Are you using, you seeing being used? And how have you had to shift the approaches and be a little bit more creative in this context? So why don't we start with you, Anmal, and you can share. Your mic's muted.
Sorry.
No worries.
But yes, this question, I was reflecting on this question, and as a whole, I feel like peer support work hasn't changed as much. It's just the mode that we're providing it in now. So very much the relationships and the conversations I'm having with folks, they still are very much the same. It's just there's different things I have to focus on. We have to focus on when we're speaking to folks. So for me now, what's different is there's even more of an emphasis of how to make things safer and more trauma informed and more culturally competent. So a lot more work than usual goes into planning that, because before I'd set up the room in a certain way, I'd have grounding tools, all that kind of stuff, and I don't have any control over their surroundings anymore. So to make sure that they're safe, there's more of a dialogue, more of a conversation about what they need, what are their needs, and how I can meet them through a virtual sense. So at Stella's, we've been using Zoom, we've been using something called Doxy, and we've been using our chat-based app called Beanbag Chat. So Beanbag Chat was something that we were using before, but now we've upped the use of it. So folks are using it much more frequently now, and there's more supporters on there. So that's something else that we've accommodated. And how have you had to shift approaches and be creative. Well, the biggest question once this pandemic started was how can we make things accessible for everyone? And how can we have our programming online, but folks can actually access it because not everyone has access to camera and mic and stuff like that. So for example, for Stella Studio, something that I was running before the pandemic, we found a way to make it virtual using video and mic. And then we recognized that, of course, we need to be understanding that not a lot of folks have video and mic or are not comfortable. So we also made like an email studio version of it. So there's been a lot of shifting, a lot of learning of new things, but PeerSupport has pretty much stayed the same for me. It's just there's extra work and there's more to learn, and yeah.
Awesome. So opening it up for other folks to bounce off that or share. Just making sure your mic's unmuted if it is.
So sorry.
No worries.
So I find that with respect to my work at CAMH, I work at Slate and I mostly work one-on-one with clients, but I also run peer support groups. So I find that the biggest challenge is kind of still maintaining and being able to cultivate and build the same rapport with clients. So especially with new clients coming in, that's been very interesting to do it virtually. I do find with the clients that I am familiar with, the rapport has been, we've been able to maintain our connection and continue to do the work. I do find that a lot of my work before the pandemic involved me taking clients to places like Stella's Place. I accompany clients to other services and agencies. A lot of my work involved maybe going into inpatient units and being physically there for clients. And I find that it is hard to provide the same level of peer support because that has been a change, is helping clients access the resources they need. Most agencies are not open or available as they typically were. So it's like, I do feel like there's this lack. But in terms of new tools, so at CAMH, at Slate, we're using WebEx like now. And I find that WebEx has been pretty okay, but the one shift has been sharing screens. We've been guided to do that more to make our online virtual meetings more interactive. And I think that's been another bonus that's allowed the virtual kind of meetings to be more dynamic, more enriching. So I think that's been a positive in terms of the technological place that we're in. And in terms of shifting approaches, I feel like I'm not someone who's really into technology. I actually do technology. And I was really, I was really like hesitant. I wasn't crazy about everything shifting online. So I haven't, I run a peer support group, and that I've put a hold on because I do find that the peer support group, its power is in that we meet in person and it's intimate and very organic. And I find that the virtual can be very disruptive in that way. I think with the sharing of screens and, getting used to the virtual in time, you just naturally adapt. And if you're flexible, you'll make it work. And so that's what I would say with respect to the changes in this time frame.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, just bouncing off of what you folks said, I think we'll hear a lot. I found like the transition to as a peer worker to the online world has been challenging because, it obviously it's not the type of job where it's meant to be online, like you have that one-on-one interaction. So there's been like new learning opportunity on our end as well as the clients that we work with too. And right now my current role is to co-facilitate groups. So I've been part of the DBT skills group and also the peer support group. And yeah, right now our platforms that we use is the Skype Business, which is a secure platform. And I think one of the challenges is it might not be compatible with like certain softwares or like say MacBooks. So we're still trying to navigate that. And folks who do join the groups also have the option of calling in. So we're still trying to figure out ways around that. And again, it's been a learning opportunity for all of us, and we're still trying to like do a trial and error around how we can better engage with our clients and see what the other options are. But yeah, in terms of groups, I just wanted to bounce off of what Amal said earlier with the safety piece. I think that's so important right now because we're trying to figure out new ways to kind of make sure that folks do feel safe and feel they're in a safe space when they're talking about certain things. Again, when you're talking through a screen, it could be like difficult, and it's not the same as when you're talking to someone face to face. So, one thing is like one thing we do is right before group starts, we provide them with an consent form, which kind of like gives them an overview of what group will look like online and the potential risks that may come. Like for example, if we can't control who like the space that we're in and who may be in the other spaces when folks are talking and sharing their experiences, right? So letting them know beforehand like what the risks are, like going into an online group, and letting them kind of decide what to do moving forward. That's how we kind of like navigate the situation right now. But yeah, otherwise we do our group guidelines, make sure everyone's on the same page about like how to feel safe in that group and what they need, like their needs when before they start. So yeah, that's how we kind of have been navigating it.
Awesome. That's great. So I think we can switch over to the next question. So we'll start with you, Brintha. What is challenging about this current context for you in terms of your role as the peer worker, but also with youth that you have been supporting through groups and one-on-one?
As a peer support worker, it has been challenging. It's been a challenging experience because folks from the social service sector, like our job isn't meant to be provided virtually most of the time. And our job is all about connection and providing that one-on-one support. And I found it to be tough to achieve the same kind of connection when you're talking to the clients from behind a screen. So even as a peer support worker, the transition was a bit hard because there is that barrier to the connection piece of our job, and we aren't able to pick up on certain emotional cues while talking through a screen. However, we do try our best during these times to show our clients that we are still here for them and we are going to try our best to support them, even though the context has changed and we have to do things online. And I also think that even though it can be a challenging experience for us workers right now, like our clients can also understand that our services do have their barriers and we are working together and trying our best to navigate them. And I guess another thing that's challenging during this time is it can be like joining groups online may not be the first choice for a lot of people, especially when learning new skills for groups such as DBT, which is one of the groups that I facilitate. And when you're online for more than an hour, it can be draining for some folks, and it may not be as interactive compared to in-person groups that we usually have. And I'm pretty sure folks have heard the term Zoom fatigue, where a lot of people experience that draining feeling from being online all the time, like virtual meetings. And yeah, a lot of our clients are still in school or attending work and may have to join those multiple virtual meetings, which can be exhausting. But we try to be flexible with the way we kind of provide those services and talk about their needs and see what middle ground we can like meet in order to make sure like everyone's feeling like, okay, this could work. But and yeah, I think those are the main challenges. And also that piece, I think earlier someone mentioned like the access, right? Technology is not accessible for a lot of people, and we're still trying to work ways around how we can still engage with the clients who don't have it, which is frustrating during this time, especially since a lot of services are closed right now. But yeah, that's what I would say about the current challenging piece about this context.
Thank you. Opening it up for others to share.
Sorry.
Oh.
Should I go?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so challenging again, I think not being able to be present with someone physically kind of can, it's harder to use body language. And so I do find that that is something that's been really unfortunate about doing the virtual meetups in this context. Again, like so much of peer support is being able to refer clients to resources and services. And because so much is not available or online, it's just not on the same level. Like, people wanting to maybe do drop-in counseling or to go somewhere to meet people, that is so much harder. And unfortunately, I can't help them beyond what's available online because of the climate. And so I find that that has prevented peer support from being what I typically would provide. And especially being able to take clients to certain agencies, because a lot of clients maybe don't know how to get there, or they just want that added support. They may be experiencing anxiety. It's just, I feel like a lot of things are on hold. And so I think that's the biggest challenge of this context is people who want to heal and recover. A lot of the help they want and need is, I think, limited, and a lot of their recovery and kind of moving forward, wanting to pursue certain things is on hold. And that I think is the hardest thing as a peer support worker is that piece.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think, if there are other peer workers on this call, I'm sure you're validating, a lot of what those experiences are. And I see you shaking your head, so I'm sure that validates. So yeah, let's hear from you.
I echo what Sarah and Brinta said. Like, same experiences our participants are experiencing at Stella's Place, and there's this need for me to make sure that they're comfortable and safe. And it's also recognizing that there's only so much I can do because I'm not even in the same room as them. But something else that's been challenging for me and, as an organization is while folks are wary about trying virtual supports, there's a demand for it now, and there's only a certain number of people on staff. So that's something that we've also been juggling with and dealing with. How do we meet everyone's needs? And then on top of that, how do we meet folks who have certain accommodations or accessibility needs? So that's another aspect that's been really challenging as well, because now is a time where we want to be there for everyone, and there's just not enough resources, and that's why there's such a need for funding in this field, and because people are looking for it, and especially now. So yeah, I wanted to add that.
That's great. And we have a few more minutes for this question. So if there's anything that's come back up, or you thought you'd forgotten, you want to mention a final piece that you wanted to share, curious about direct anecdotes or maybe even feedback you've heard from the people that you're supporting about what their experiences have been like. Any feedback you've gotten, that would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I can give some feedback. There's some folks who've completely accepted the virtual platform and are totally fine and willing to try it. And then there's some folks that I have that have asked to pause their sessions because they prefer in-person sessions. So it's very interesting to see that some folks are okay with it and some folks aren't, and it's totally valid as to why they're not comfortable being on camera, they're not comfortable being on phone. And that was something that I also had to deal with as a peer supporter because I'm not comfortable being in front of camera. I don't know if folks can tell, but yeah, so it's also respecting folks' boundaries and being there for them in any way that they can. If that's through a text as well, then it's through text.
Yeah, I'm sure, Brinta, you could echo this. We've certainly seen that at Loft. Our participation in groups has just changed. Some people just decided I'm not gonna, like the regular attendees to our groups just stopped coming when we moved virtually, and they await the day that, we will resume online. That has been something we've seen. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brinta.
No, for sure. Yeah. That's definitely been something that has happened, especially in our groups where, like Chris mentioned, the regular attendees haven't been coming. And honestly, like if I was put in that position, I can definitely relate to that. Like I'm not a huge fan of online meetups or online attending online groups where, especially like groups where there's a lot of information being thrown at you, like learning new skills. So I can really relate to that feeling. And that's one of the challenges that has been coming up. And it's our group numbers have been fluctuating because of that. And also there's like other factors as well, right? Like it's summer's coming and not a lot of people do want to stay home and do online groups right now or do things online and per se when they can go out and do their go outside and do stuff. So yeah, there's a lot coming up during this time and a lot of changes as a result.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, certainly lots of challenges. Many we probably can't name, but you all sound like you're doing fantastically in how to meet those. So we can move on to our next question, which is, how are you addressing those challenges within yourself? Like some of the things that you maybe felt the discomfort around going online and how that has you've worked that out for yourself, and then how have you supported, and maybe even like a little bit more probing, and Sarah, you can start, for some of the people that have chosen to pause, that's certainly a challenge now. Where are they getting support, or what would that support look like? How do they navigate that? But I'll leave it open for you to share how you've been meeting some of these challenges.
I think just always reminding clients that I'm available. So I make sure that I'm accessible via phone, that they can email me at any time. And again, virtually just making the meetings a little more dynamic. So sharing screens, maybe bringing like meditation, mindfulness, sharing links. That is possible. I think there isn't so much anything you can do, and I think it was said before, like we all know and understand the context. We're in a pandemic. So much is on hold. So many places, and services, resources are not available. So just making the most of each session and kind of meeting ourselves where we're at, and just kind of, I guess being patient is all you can really do, and just hopefully waiting for things to turn around. And then again, just like making use of what is available. So there are agencies providing peer support groups or online counseling, and just like relying on the few that do exist is, I think, just the way right now.
Thank you. Yeah. Other folks want to share?
Yeah, just echoing what Sarah mentioned, just reminding them that I am available is actually super helpful in this context, because I've had like experiences where there is that option for them to like speak to me, even if it's after group, like maybe a phone call check-in and or whatever. But I've noticed this a few times where clients feel guilty for asking that because they think it's like out of our way to do that. But because it's so different for them, right? Like versus us being physically there, and it seems like as it's part of our job versus like through the phone where you're just doing a check-in aside from the group. So just reminding them that, hey, like this is the situation right now, but like I am available and I'm here to support you. And also just validating what they're feeling, because it is a hard thing to go through, like especially being online when you don't want to be talking through that platform. And when you have that, when you don't really have a choice of meeting in person, I think it's really important to just validate those feelings. And um, it it kind of brings in that connection piece and be like, hey, it's tough. It's a tough position to be in. Um, but yeah, like in terms of addressing it for myself personally, I think it's still a constant learning experience for me. Like I'm still not really used to the whole online thing, even though it's been a couple of months now, but it's still like something that I'm still getting used to. But what has been helping me is just like um, we have something called like team supervisions, and those have been super helpful because I can just like have a team meeting with like a couple of my coworkers and just share those, experiences and those feelings. And a lot of them feel the same way, and we kind of bounce back on each other for support and tips on how to kind of navigate that feeling of, you know, um, discomfort of being online versus in-person sessions. So yeah.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, and so much I think what you're all saying is probably validating other people's experiences right now in terms of their own challenges. So thank you. Anma, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, echoing everything that Brinta just said, being very transparent with participants and giving them space to talk about these challenges that are happening right now, I think has been very important for me. Because we cannot proceed business as usual when there's a pandemic happening and there's like anti-blackness on media and all that, and giving folks the chance to talk about it, let me know how they're feeling, and I also of course share my feelings as well. I think that's been very, very helpful, not only just for the participants, but for me as well, because it is validating. Um, and something else that I've been doing to address these challenges is really understanding what folks' needs are and what folks are experiencing. So if sessions run for an hour, for example, understanding that if there is Zoom fatigue or if there is phone fatigue, that it's okay to end sessions early if participants are okay with that. And recognizing that if I have a participant who is in school right now and they're using Zoom, maybe asking them, would you prefer a phone call instead of a Zoom call because you've been on Zoom for like hours already today. So really just trying to meet them where they're at, and reaching out to them instead of also waiting for them to reach out, because this is a difficult time, especially for our BIPOC folks and stuff and our Black folks. So not being afraid to reach out and say, hey, I am here. I know you maybe have paused supports here for now at Stella's, but if you're wanting to debrief, if you're wanting to talk, if you're wanting someone to listen, we're still here. So still making myself very much available.
It's awesome. It sounds like in so many ways, you're having to make explicit was probably things we took for granted before, which is like someone comes to an office, it sits in an office. Now it's having to discuss and open up about how does this feel? What is this like? And we're, learning organically as we go. And I'm wondering what that's like for all of you, just like to be in a place where we don't really quite know how to do it. And there's this, we're navigating macro uncertainty, and then in your job, there's been uncertainty in terms of like, what's your role and, what is safe when you're online? I'm just curious if there's anything else you wanted to share on that. Or just maybe, again, another success story or anecdote of something that's gone well in terms of supporting a client get online and get access. Like if you saw someone who was having the challenges and were able to support them in connecting.
Yeah, something that I have noticed with a particular participant is they actually were not willing to come in person, but since Zoom and phone has become more of the need because of our current climate, they've been using services even more. So, while there are folks who are leaving services because they don't want to do the virtual or the phone calls, there are folks who are actually more willing to now, have one-on-one sessions and come or do a Zoom chat or something like that for service or support because that is more comfortable for them. So that's something that I've noticed as well, and I wanted to share.
Great, thank you. There's a couple more minutes on this. If there's anything else related to that, Brinta or Sarah, that you wanted to share. Otherwise, we can move on to the Q&A. We do have several questions coming up, but any final thoughts on challenges, or are we ready to move forward? Okay, great. So yeah, let's move on. We've got several questions popping up. Our first question, I'm just going to open floor this question, and for those folks may have already seen, Emma has shared that you can type in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we will get to them in the time that we have. The first question that we have is, how can you make online video-based interactions engaging for youth? How do you make youth feel comfortable sharing online? Example, unmuting themselves when they have something good to say. And how do you have vulnerable, meaning conversations online without making it feel like a meeting? So it seems like the overall sense is, how are you helping youth feel engaged and comfortable in these spaces?
Yeah, I can add something to that. Something that I've been doing is the beginning of every Zoom chat, saying that this is really weird and this is really awkward and it's awkward for me and it might be feeling awkward for you, and normalizing that it's totally fine to be feeling out of place online or feeling like you're not being supported at this moment. But I think sharing my own experience, saying that, hey, this is also something that's new for me, let's work on it together. I noticed that folks are more inclined to open up and more inclined to talk about what they're experiencing, and then move into DBT skills or things that you were scheduled to talk about. So I think having a portion in the beginning of the Zoom call or the Zoom chat and saying, hey, this is different for both of us, this is kind of weird, let's talk about this for a bit, and then we can get into what we wanted to talk about. I think that's really helpful for me.
Hey, yeah, I agree. Just keeping it real and being honest about the circumstances. Also, I shared before, we were guided to do shared screens. So, bringing in materials, maybe doing a guided meditation together, or having PowerPoint slides, websites that we can work with the client one-on-one together, so it makes the virtual meeting more dynamic and more enriching. So bringing in maybe short lessons or videos, that's what we're guided to do at Slate, to make the online sessions, meetings, or I guess more
Sarah, you kind of cut it at the end, but maybe you just wrapped up.
sorry, I wrapped up. Sorry.
Yeah, no. anything you want to add to that, Brinta?
Yeah, just agreeing with Amal with the piece about transparency. Just before like just going on to the group, we do quick check-ins, right? And just being transparent about that and just being like, hey, this is new for us too, for me too. And I'm still having like, I still deal with these technical issues from day to day when I'm joining online. And folks can relate to that and kind of like, and they are more inclined to open up and share those experiences and how they're really feeling. So it's also helping build trust too through the online platform, because like you never know what to expect, and when folks start really opening up about how they're feeling, their experiences, yeah, I find it easier to have that better connection with whoever does join those groups. So that has been helpful as well, and just also like sticking to creating that group guidelines with the folks who join and agreeing to them and making sure everyone feels respected and safe in that space.
Awesome. Okay, we'll move on to our next question. Someone asked, if I'm looking to create a peer support group or program right now, what are some essential steps I should look to take? What are some of the ways assuring that it's trauma-informed and culturally competent?
I had to kind of revamp studio for Stella's and make it virtual, and I had the same questions. I think for me, the biggest thing was accessibility. How can we make this accessible for all people, all folks? And how can we make sure that there's enough options for folks to choose from? So making sure that they get to choose what they are getting out of this support instead of us lying strict rules down, like this is it, this is all, you know, the program's going to be, you cannot have your mic off or your camera off. Like providing options for folks and giving them room to make their own choices makes it more trauma informed as well. So I think that's something to look into. Should we have strict rules about cameras and mics or not when we're using a Zoom call? That's something that we decided not to do because some folks are not comfortable being on camera sometimes. And you know, saying that no, you have to be on camera the entire time does not make it accessible for everyone. So these are questions that we have to ask, and I reflect on myself and my own lived experience. You know, going through this pandemic as well. What would I want to see? So yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone else want to jump in and add?
I think that piece about focusing on being trauma informed and also accessibility, uh, they do go hand in hand as well, and are super important to consider when thinking of trauma informed practice while running a peer support group or a program or whatever it is, right? Because it's just like understanding where each person's at and kind of understanding what their needs are in this space and kind of catering towards like just being flexible, I guess, right? So I think, yeah, accessibility is a super important piece that make that kind of helps us understand like where folks are at in their journey and what, you know, they feel comfortable with doing when they're joining groups or having, you know, sessions with workers.
Great. I'm just curious just to build on that, because, you know, the question was like similarly around the steps. You know, we talked about these platforms and we've talked about the ways that the technology has been using, and then how some people don't, you know, they can't log in, or that it's not compatible, or they're having. So yeah, how do we navigate that and these choices, but also try to keep a coherency to things at the same time? What has been your experience of, you know, trying to, you know, meet people in all the different places and then have participation? And I guess I'm thinking, you know, are our online groups, we sometimes want to share the screen, but if someone's calling in, they can't see the screen. How are we navigating those? That's an accessibility thing in that they can participate verbally, but how do you address that, I guess? What steps are you taking to address that?
Speaking from like my experience with online groups, I've had incidences where like I was actually on that experiencing that where if there is like a screen share and I'm not able to view it, like I mean a lot of clients do go through that as well, and it is challenging for sure because they don't really get as much out of the group than the folks who can access it fully. So we try to find ways like we send whatever's being shared prior to group start, so they kind of still have the content, and we kind of go through even though it's like available on screen while groups happening, we as facilitators make sure that we're kind of walking through the steps as well, so they do feel like they are part of it and involved still, even though they can't really see the screen like the other folks. So we try to work that way and try to still like make sure they still feel part of the group, even though there are some like barriers to it.
And one thing I hear too, and maybe Enmal and Sarah, you can relate to this, and this has been my observation in terms of supervising the peers at Loft, is, there seems to be a lot more preparation and thought, leading up to groups, leading up to sessions than maybe there had been before. And that must be a big adaptation. Like the steps that are necessary now are also, making sure you make the time beforehand and sure to like allow people to like troubleshoot getting online, and sending documents and creating documents that you didn't necessarily have to create. That seems to be, there's been an increase in maybe your administrative time. I don't know if that's true for you, Sarah and Anmol.
Yeah, that's been. Sarah, would you like to?
No worries. I would agree with that. Like, I think everything does take more thought. There are more protocols to ensure safety and to make sure that, if there is an emergency, a client is able to be contacted. So yes, for sure.
Yeah, at Stella's Place, for example, we send out Zoom links beforehand, and then there's a step-by-step guide of how to use Zoom. So a lot of planning goes into it as well. We have comfort agreements that we have to share screens for. We send comfort agreements in email to all participants so they can read it on their own. So there is a lot of admin work, as you were saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's just like for the folks thinking about the steps to consider in terms of starting a virtual program. Considering all the logistics that go in, not just like creating it, but the day-to-day logistics of getting ready, prepping, getting people in, navigating that. There's a lot of moving parts. And with that, actually, what you mentioned, the comfort and comfort agreements and people's privacy. So there's a question here around that specifically. Another challenge young people are having is that they don't feel comfortable accessing services from home, and because they may not want to have their parents hear their conversations or other people, their roommates, hearing conversations, especially if it's around sensitive topics like their mental health. Has anyone had any experience being able to help youth navigate around this?
Yeah, that was like my primary concern when the pandemic went down, because so many participants live in spaces where they're not, able to be their authentic selves, and they're not able to talk about their experiences. So luckily, Stella's Place has a chat-based app like Beanbag Chat. So it doesn't fully solve the problem, unfortunately, but folks can, instead of calling in or using Zoom, can be typing or texting the peer supporter or me. So that's been very, very helpful for that. And there are some instances where we cannot go around that. Like some folks cannot use that that app at all. So it's also working with the participant to find out what times would be best, asking those questions like, okay, what time are your parents not home, you know? And sometimes that means switching stuff around in your schedule or having an early morning appointment. But like I said before, like meeting them where they're at and asking them what would work best. And if that doesn't work, then the chat-based app has been very helpful for us here at Stellas.
Sarah, Brenta, do you want to add anything around navigating that with people and helping them find the spaces?
Hey, I think with I just make sure that like I ask clients if they want to speak on the phone, because at least most clients do have cell phones, they can leave. And I've had that happen. Clients will go outside, maybe when they're just in a place where they do feel comfortable. So not always relying on WebEx, but giving them that option is what I find has been helpful.
Great. Okay, well, we have time for one more question. There's been so many, and sorry we can't get to everything. But I think there was a question from one of the participants just around if you were to work for a really fabulous organization doing this work, what would the supports look like for you? The question specifically was, if you as a peer support worker had fabulous organizational supports for doing your work virtually, what would those supports look like? You could even just name one. Again, yeah.
Yeah, I can add something to that. I think organization like that to exist, it has to be accessible to everyone. And it's also virtual support. Do folks have computers and mics, and also acknowledging that not everyone does. So I don't know the answers to how an organization would run, because frankly, there isn't an organization that runs exactly perfectly like that. But I'd be really curious to see if other folks have any input. But accessibility is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I'm curious, even just like, I'm asking now selfishly, but I think for a lot of people, what has your supervision been like? What support what has been effective in terms of your supervision even?
I can talk on that. I was actually going to bring that up, but I think what has been helping me personally is the supervision, the one-on-one supervisions, but also like we have another type of supervision with like a group of our coworkers who bring in different perspectives from the work that they do. And yeah, just I think as workers, like it's tough right now, and if we kind of rely on each other to get that support and get those like resources and tips that we can kind of bounce back on each other to see what will work. But even like the one-on-one supervisions, I think those are helpful because you kind of get away from everything and you kind of get that space to really share what has been challenging for you and how we can kind of um work with it and move forward, like see what options are available. And I find those supportive in terms of like kind of finding a solution to the situation. Um, and yeah, that's how I personally got the support that I needed throughout these couple of months when we transitioned online. And yeah.
Thanks. Sarah, any final words that you want to say on that?
Yeah, no, my boss has been very good at Slate at CAMH. We work on teams. We have a lot of team meetings. My boss has done a number of individual check-ins. A lot of coworkers we've been in touch. So There has been a very supportive team environment so that if there are any complaints, there's also like a peer support committee collective at Campbell for peer support workers in other departments to just gather together. So it is available and accessible if there is a need for it. You know?
Awesome. Well, that is all the time we have for questions. There's been a lot of great stuff being exchanged in the chat. Joanna, you were fielding a lot of questions there too. Thank you for doing that. Love to see the lively discussion. And that concludes the Q&A period. And yeah, we'll leave it to, I guess, wrap up now.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much to our panelists. Brintha, Sarah, Emil, and your facilitation, Christopher. That was a really fabulous panel, really informative, you know, really thoughtful and thought-provoking. And I think from where I sit and the role that I have, you know, I really want to be thinking about how we're supporting our peer support workers as best we can, how we're creating access for all young people to be able to engage, and also thinking about what are some other ways we can think about peer support in the context of you know, our current situation. I'm hoping that we can maybe even have some follow-up conversations. As you pointed out, there were many questions in the Q&A in the chat box. I know Emma will be and Leah will be keeping track of our questions so that we also can create documents that we can share out with some of our learnings from today, and we'll also be making the video available. But I hope that all of you will see this, and all of the people who are participants as well will see this as the start of a discussion that will hopefully be able to have over time. But just in this moment, just a real heartfelt thanks to all of you for agreeing to be speakers and panelists today. Emma and Leah, who organized and do all of the sort of like making this happen, just want to express thank you to you as well. I will turn it over to Emma for closing administrative pieces, but for all of you on the phone, thank you for taking the time to be here today. Thank you for your interest in this work. I see it as critically important to system transformation as we move forward in Ontario. Emma, over to you.
Thanks so much, Joanne, and thanks so much again to all our panelists and Christopher. I just want to point out some stuff on the screen right now. You've got our website, youthhubs.ca, where you'll be able to find not only the recording from today, but a number of resources and videos that you may find useful, including a series featuring Christopher, where we talk about how to set up an effective peer support program. Our website is also available in French, and you can see the URL on the right side of your screen there. On the bottom half of this slide, you'll see we have an email address where you can contact us if you have any questions. And you can also see the URL for our online community of practice. That's a place where any of you can go if you'd like to join. It's a place where we have discussions where you can go to either share resources or find resources or ask questions of your peers. So I just wanted to share that with you all. This is the third webinar in our series. So thank you for those who have attended the other ones, and there will be more webinars to come, so stay tuned. And then finally, please do fill out our evaluation survey if you have 2 minutes to spare. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.